Hey there, if you are thinking about selling your house in the spring and in the summer and you are interviewing agents, now is the time to do it. Now is the time to strategize. It's the time to plan. But I find that the general population might not know what kind of questions to ask their realtor to qualify their ability to be able to sell your house. So we have come together with some questions that you should ask your realtor to just identify their qualification.
It's really important to know that you connect with the person you're going to be spending a lot of time with. You have to have a relationship. You might have a great realtor, but maybe you don't connect with that person. And it's really important to develop that relationship and spend the time making sure and asking those right questions to ensure you have the person that's going to protect your interest.
Absolutely.
So Barry, let's talk about some of these questions
Sure.
That we think as realtors are important.
So this first question, is real estate your full-time or part-time job?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Why is that important? Go ahead, Barry.
I was going to say the grind,
Yeah.
right? So when you do real estate full-time, when that's your full-time career where you're studying the market, you're selling homes, you're in it, you're in the negotiating, you're just in the zone. Mm-hmm. That is a very different grind. It's a very different mindset than someone who does it part-time, who might not have as sharp negotiating skills because you're not doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And the markets too, the market goes up and down. It changes, right? You need to pivot. And for those of us who do it full time, you have the skills to what we love to call bob and weave.
Bob and weave.
Bob and weave. We had an old boss who used to tell us all the time, you got to bob and weave. Bob and weave.
Yeah, it's like ingrained. But yeah, I mean, when you do something every day, don't you find when you do something every day, it just becomes like muscle memory.
Oh, 100%.
And while you have that muscle memory, you also have to have the ability to become a chameleon in whichever transaction you're working on, because no two are alike. So being able to identify that and doing this every single day gives you the experience to make sure that you're dealing with this particular situation the best of your ability, instead of, just picking and choosing how you're going to respond to a certain issue.
Yeah. So we think that's important.
Yeah.
We think that when you hire your realtor, hiring someone who does it full time is financially advantageous to you.
Yeah.
Our second question, how many homes have you sold in the last 12 months?
Yeah.
I think this is an important one because there's, agents who might be in the business 20, 30 years and, love to throw out numbers over the course of that career. However, what that doesn't spell out is, how have they performed in tough markets, in particular coming out of COVID years.
Yes.
Where, interest rates skyrocketed up to 8% in the fall of 2023, and all of a sudden people aren't buying as many houses. They're not quite as eager. You're not, at one point when we had, 20 different offers for a listing.
We're begging for one.
Now we're begging for one. How do you,
Yeah.
So how many units has your agent sold in the last 12 months?
And it's also important to identify those agents that are actually selling and not a referral-based agent. Not that that's not a good thing, because referrals are wonderful, but there are different types of interactions that you're going to encounter when you are in the deal, when you're in the transaction and you're working with the lenders and you're working with the attorneys. So when you are a referral-based realtor, you're not able to identify those types of scenarios. So that's also important.
I thought this was interesting. I pulled up, I had heard this statistic before. It was a good reminder to see it again.
Yeah.
So the National Association of Realtors notes that of the real estate population, 70% only sell 5 houses or less.
That's unbelievable to me.
70%. 50% sell between 0 and 2 houses a year. That's it. So while, you might have your friend, you might have
your uncle,
hopefully it's not drunk uncle from Saturday Night Live, it's that person that and love might not be the most
equipped
and financial. It might not be the most financially advantageous situation, because at the end of the day, this is your largest investment. and you want someone who's going to take great care of that. So keep in mind, it was mind-blowing to see that statistic again.
It's hard to believe. Yeah.
So with only that 30% that are actively in the grind, doing it all the time, like you and I, that's just something a good question to ask your realtor when you're interviewing.
How many homes have you sold in the last 12 months?
Yeah. Right. Next question, how well do you know the community and how well do you know the market?
Yeah. That is so important because real estate is localized, right? You can look on the news and see what the average interest rates are nationally, or what the demand is, or how many months on market. But every community, every area has a different statistic when it comes to the demands. And they're all different. So it's really important that if you're working with a realtor, ask them where do they work? What are the communities and the locations that they service? Because they're all different. The demand is different. The houses are different.
All that then gets back down to the negotiating.
Right.
It gets down to the marketing. It gets down to how do you find your people. And so, we were just talking about this. Sometimes you'll see a listing where I know in that particular community, there's so many like greenways. There's, high-ranking schools. It's, that there are things that aren't identified on that listing. And so from a marketing perspective, it's not getting out to the people who choose to live in that area for those things because the agent's not familiar with the community.
Right. And that's for buying and selling. Knowing how difficult it was for one home to sell prior to you selling that home now.
Yeah.
How did that translate into how many days on market it was? What was the price point? What was the list price versus the sold price? That goes back to history and knowing that community. Very important. Very important question to ask the realtor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question. Tell me, this is a good one.
Yeah.
Tell me about a recent deal that didn't go smoothly and how did you handle that?
Yeah. Great question, because let me tell you, there are some doozies out there.
Yes,
and if you cannot bob and weave, then you're in trouble, because these issues come up very frequently where you're like, okay, how do we overcome this? We're not just going to throw our hands up and let someone else make the decisions. You have to implement how you want this transaction to go, what the next step is going to be, and where we're going to go based on that problem. So it's important to get specific with your realtor. Ask them the specific question. Don't generalize. Oh, well, we had a lending problem, or, and we were able to overcome that. That's a very general answer. Ask the specific question. What was it? How did they do it? Who did they talk to? Those types of questions.
Too, and unless you're in the business of selling houses, right? Even if you've owned a couple of houses, you're not in the practice. And so I think clients forget that there's several opportunities to negotiate in a transaction. It doesn't just stop when you have an agreed upon price. You still have to get through
the repairs,
the inspection, the repairs. And that can get super emotional, super frustrating. If you've raised your babies in this house and this new buyer, hates everything.
Wants to take the painted and take the front porch off where you rocked your child to sleep.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that can get emotional.
How do you get through that and those difficult conversations where, you keep your clients at peace because they're so frustrated, where as agents, we're working together, both the list agent and on the buy side, to get to the finish line.
Right.
And
so we will remain calm and have a very reasonable,
cool
head, so that way we can keep our clients calm. Because if the realtors are emotional or over emotional, it will translate and it will pass along to the client, and then they will be stressed out. So that's important to do as well.
Yeah. And then the final question: how will we communicate, and how often?
Set that expectation.
This is a great one. I got a client this year who I met them at an open house in the spring. And they were working with their agent. They never heard from their agent. They felt like their agent was too busy for them. And because they met me at this open house at the beginning of the year, they called me in August. And I made because I had their contact information from the open house, kept in touch with them. They received our newsletter, and they reached out to me. I then, helped them sell a house and buy a house.
Yeah.
And so without a doubt, the keeping that communication is
we're
so
not going to
important.
ghost you, and a lot of times that happens. It's not just sitting, putting the sign in the yard. You have to know what's going on. How was the traffic this week? Was there any feedback? What can we do to improve based on that feedback? Those are all things that we want to keep our clients in the loop with, and you should be in the loop with. But there are some clients that don't want to hear from you every single day, and that's okay. That's okay. We will determine and set the expectations based on our initial conversations with our client to find out what's the best way. How would you prefer to be contacted, and not treating every client the same. So.
I think I know, and you've mentioned this too. For my clients, I'll do a weekly check-in because the market does
changes.
It change. 2025 was a great example. As soon as April hit, when tariffs hit and all of a sudden the market just kind of hunkered down, listings that were like flying off the shelves after 2024's election, at the top of the year, things all of a sudden had this stop. And so, having those weekly check-ins with my clients, letting them know, all right, what's the price per square foot that these houses are closing at in the same neighborhood? What are the days on market? Again, it's created. It's that bob and weave. It's of the changing up the strategy if you need to, and having a collaborative effort. Because at the end of the day, what are your clients' motivations, and how do you achieve the end goal?
Yeah. So ask the questions. Very, very important when you're interviewing realtors, and it is important to interview realtors. Again, like going back to the beginning, making sure you connect with them. Personalities clash sometimes. You could have a great realtor, but the personality just clashes. So it's important. It's important to interview the person you're going to be spending a good amount of time with.
Yeah.
So those are the questions that we think are important. If you have any suggestions, definitely reach out to us. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We would love to keep entertaining you and providing you with all the information about Lake Norman. So definitely subscribe, and we look forward to the next time we see you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.